The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Tanya, and I'm the Marketing Manager over here at Struxoft Solutions, part of the Great Tech Group. Just for those of you who are new with us today, our STAR solution MWF, which stands for Metal Wood Framer, is our Revit-based BIM framing solution that automates the creation of walls, floors, ceilings, and trusses in like-H steel and also in wood. Today, however, our technician Marilyn will be walking you through all the options in the Structural Members tab in MWF. So she'll be covering the following options: stud arrangements, stud configurations, by benchmark, and also the Miscellaneous tab. Just before we get going, I'd like to remind everyone that at the end of the webinar, we'll be taking a couple of live questions. In order to be selected, please press the raise hand button on the dashboard. Just please also make sure that your mic is working correctly. If you'd prefer, you can also ask questions throughout the webinar by typing into the questions tab of the GoToWebinar dashboard. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to hand off to Marilyn now.
Perfect. Thank you, Tanya. So like Tanya was saying, today we're going to go over the structural member option in the panels property. So here I just have a project, it's a big project, and what I did was I just broken it down into sections, and then we're going to go into each of the options that are available. So the first option that we have is the stud arrangements. So to do that, we're going to go into the panels property. It's going to be under the miscellaneous, and we're going to go over the structural members. So in here, you can see that we have a couple of options. We're going to go in the first tab, the stud arrangements, and we're going to go over the restart at openings. So what this does is, if I'm just going to remove myself from the properties, is it has to do with the spacing. So you have your panel. So I'm just going to turn this around since this is the start of my panel here. With the panel, we try to do your first stud offset, and then from there we do the continuous spacing of what the value is. So in this panel, my stud spacing is 16 inches. However, we can see that when it comes to openings, we try to do the 16 on center, so you can see that your cripples will do the 16 on center. However, you can see after the opening, it's not respecting the 16 on center due to, you know, placing an opening. So what we can do is we can restart your spacing at the first or last king. Now to do that, we're going to go back into the panels property, back into the miscellaneous, back into the structural members, and we need to have this restart at openings checked. There is a setting button. We're going to click on it. We're just going to put it onto the other side. So like I was just stating before, is we have the option to restart your spacing at the first king. So that would be the first king of that opening, of the opening itself, or the last king. Now, if we are restarting at the first king, it's going to do the stud spacing when it comes to the cripples, and then in respect to your maximum spacing. So for in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the last king. So at the last king of that opening, we're going to do the first spacing of what you've put. So again, like I said, in this panel, it is 16 uncentered. We also have an option in this one to override the cripple spacing. Since we are starting from the last king, we had the option. Again, this option is available for both first and last. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my stud spacing for my cripples 12 inches, and my spacing is still going to be 16 due to the spacing of the panel itself. I'm going to hit close. I'm going to hit OK. So right now what's happening is it's just taking my panel, and it's just going to do the arrangement of my spacing. So you can see if I go over around here, you can see the spacing is much smaller than it was before. And also that member that's not there anymore, it is now the spacing of what your panel is. Now, if you do go in there and change the spacing back to, or change it to, let's say 24 inches, it's going to respect that, and it's always going to restart your spacing at the last king. Next option that we have, if I go in there again, is the stud arrangements. So I'm going to go into the panels property again of this panel, and we're going to go over the max peak. So again, just going back into the structural member tab, and you can see here we have it at normal. So normal means it just respects your stud spacing, whatever value you put in there, if it's, panel's property, the instance, or the type parameter. Here you can see that we kind of have a couple of options that we have here. So we're going to go over the max peak, and what the max peak will do, it will give you equal spacing throughout your panels. So you have the first stud offset, that's from the start of the panel to the center of the first one, and then your equal spacing of your studs. However, we can see in the end portion here, sometimes it doesn't, it's not the same equal option that we have in the front of the panel. So you can see here, if I look, let me just go into a front view so we can get a little bit better view here. You can see now this value that we have here is going to be exactly the same as this one here. So this is an option that you can use when it comes to trusses. So it just gives you equal spacing, the start and end. Another option that we have, if I just go into another tool here, is the option for reverse. So what this does is, let me just go into a floor plan so we can get a little bit better view of it. So there it is. So what this does is it reverses the information that we have in the panel's property. So you can see in this case is if I look at this panel, I'm just going to zoom out again, you have the interior. So by default, your panel's label gets placed in the interior. So if I select that first stud here, you can see that this is S1. So we're going to go from left to right. And what the reverse does, it reverses the studs inside of the panel. Your panel's still going to go from left to right in this case here. However, your first stud offset is going to start from the end of the panel going to the front of the panel. And by doing that, you're just going to need to go into the panel's property, go into miscellaneous, go into structural members, and instead of having a normal, we're going to have reverse. We're going to hit close, we're going to hit OK. It is still, again, your opening side of your studs are still going to be facing the direction of that panel. So you can see if I zoom in here, it's still going to the same location. However, if I select this number here, you can see that it's now S36, sorry, instead of 1. If I zoom onto the bottom of it, you can see that this one is 1. And my dimension, sorry, there from here is 1'4". So this just reverses the order of where the first stud offset starts. However, the stud's still going to respect your direction. So since it's going from left to right, the opening is facing this direction, it's still going to keep that arrangement for you. Perfect. So next one I'm going to go over is the last stud fixed distance. So what this does is, if let's say, for example, you have your first stud offset, then you have your spacing throughout, and then near the end of your panel, you need to have that member at that location. It doesn't matter what your spacing is, you always need it to be at that value. So this is where that option comes in. So again, we're going to go back into the miscellaneous, back into the structural members, and we're just going to have the last stud at fixed distance checked, and then we just need to put a value in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 7 inches. I'm going to hit OK, and you're going to see that the member is going to appear here. So that is the fixed distance that we put. My spacing is at 16 on centered. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go back in there, and I'm going to back into the panel's property, and I'm going to change my spacing to 24. So I'm changing the first stud offset, and then I'm going to go into the studs, and again changing this to 24. However, you're going to notice that that 7 inch is still going to be there because we told the panel to always have that member at that location at the end of that panel. So it doesn't matter what your spacing is, it's always going to be a fixed distance. Next one we're going to have is the option for chase walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my level 1. So here is my chase wall. So what I have done in this portion here is I have made my members smaller than what the panel thickness is. So I mean, I'm using 250 S125 37s with the KSI of 33s. And what I would like to do is I would like to have the option to stagger my studs. Again, with this one, this is their basic chase wall option, and this one here will stagger your members. So we just need to have this option checked. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see if I kind of zoom in there, it is staggered my members. Please note that this does not affect your end studs. So if you want to change your end studs to a larger member, you need to make sure you go into the end stud command in the panels property to do that process. And what I have done to change these members is just go into the panels property and just change the extra vertical column option. Perfect. Next one I'm going to be showing you is the benchmarks option. So I'm just going to zoom into this area here. We have oops, sorry, it's on my level 2. There it is. So for the benchmarks, to apply a benchmark, there's a couple of ways of doing that. So I'm just going to kind of zoom into this area here where I have some grid lines. So if I go down to the markers, because a benchmark is a marker, we have benchmarks by grids. We have also benchmark by selections. So we have 2 types of benchmarks. We have the traditional benchmark that you can see here, or we have also a grid line benchmark. To place ones, you can do it by selection, or you can do it by grid lines. Usually your project will already have grid lines, so you can just select the grid lines you have there. If not, you can just model them too. So just to do it, to select your grid lines, you're going to select benchmark by grids, and it's going to ask you to name it. So I'm going to do is I'm going to name it BM2. I'm going to hit OK. So with this benchmark, it's going to look like this. This benchmark can be moved wherever you'd like it to be. Other things you need to know about this benchmark is if you do copy it, it allows you to do it. However, if I do select the original benchmark, you can see that in the instance properties here, you have a mark. That is where we put the name. And it's very important that when you do copy it, if you are going to copy it, is that you rename it to what you need it to be. And the reason for that is when we're going to be using the benchmark option in the stud members, it's going to recognize this benchmark. However, it doesn't have a name. So if you copied it multiple times, you're going to have a list of options that you can select, but with no name. So you don't know which ones you're going to be selecting. So that's just what you just need to know about the benchmarks. Also, you can hide it since it's a little bit large, and you can also pin it too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my 3D view of my benchmark. And to associate it, we're going to just go into the properties of that panel. I'm going to go into miscellaneous structural members. And again, for the stud arrangements, we're going to say benchmark. And then we're going to say by what benchmark. So again, you can also reference it to reference planes. And then here are the 2 benchmarks I have created. So I'm going to select my first one here. I'm going to hit close and OK. So what's going to happen is my studs are going to see where that benchmark is located, and it's going to take my, it's going to align it to that benchmark. And let me just zoom over here. It's going to align it to the benchmark, and then from each location, it's going to do your spacing. Now, if the benchmark does get moved, let's say, for example, I'm just going to go into an elevation view, and I'm just going to temporarily hide these guys so that we don't get messed up. So again, you can see it's not aligned to anything. So if we do select the member, since we have moved the benchmark, all we have to do is just regenerate the panel, and it is going to locate that we have moved it and then aligned it to it. Please note, if you do delete the benchmark and you do regenerate a panel that is associated to a benchmark, what's going to happen is the studs are going to go back to its original location. However, I'm just going to move it onto my other screen. It is going to give you a warning stating that the benchmark that was associated, so in this case is BM1, cannot be found. Sorry, it must have been deleted. It revert back to the stud arrangement, went back to normal. However, this dialog box will keep coming up until you go into the panels property, back into the structural members, and then select back to normal, and that error will not appear again. So again, if I hit OK, perfect. So next one I am going to show you, let me just appear over here. I'm going to go into the panels property. So we have done the stud arrangement tab. Now we're going to get to the next tab. So this is the tab where you can change the quantity of what type of studs that you have. So normal will be what the default will give you, and that's going to be a single stud. If we do hit the pull down, you're going to see we have a couple of options here. One that's going to be on the list is double, and because we are adding more than two or more members, it also gives you the option for a sub-assembly. So you just come here and you select. Again, I only have the default ones, but if you already had a categories here, you can select them. We're going to hit close, and we're going to hit OK. And also, please note that everything that's in that structural member tab, you can save it in also a template. But if you are going to export it and import your templates and you have it associated to a benchmark, you need to make sure that the benchmark exists in the project. Now, if I zoom in there, you can see that I don't have single studs anymore. I have now doubled. With the double studs, I'm just going to go into a top view. They're going to be placed exactly how the original member is going to be placed. Next option that we have in that same category is back-to-back. So again, this will give you double studs. However, they're going to be located back-to-back. So again, we're going to go back into the miscellaneous, back to the structural tab, and we're going to hit the back-to-back. Close OK. So this is an easier way to, double your studs if this is something that is needed in your project. So if I zoom in there, you can see that they are back-to-back now. The next one we have is the face-to-face. So if I zoom in there, you can see that my studs are now face-to-face. And the last option that we have there that can be used is triple. So if you need to have 3 members, this is an option that you can use. We do also have, if I just hit the pull down, we do also have interlock options. However, you need to have special families for it because if I did use just the SSMAs, the members are going to be clashing. So you have to use special members for those. And if you are using those special members, you have the interlock option. I am going to select a triple. I'm going to hit close and I'm going to hit OK. So for some reason, if you needed to triple your members and so maybe a location, you could use this option here. These options are available for both wood and steel. So now you can see I have 3 members here. And the next option that I'm going to be using in the next dialog box that I'm going to be showing you is the miscellaneous option. So for the miscellaneous option, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go into the panels property. So it's going to be miscellaneous structural, and then you can see if it just makes the tab just a tad bit bigger, you can see that we have a miscellaneous option here. So with the miscellaneous option, you can see we have a couple of options here. The first option is the override cripples. Now, when you are creating a panel and you are associating your vertical columns to what your studs are, by default our end studs or jacks or kings or cripples are all going to read that same information. So you can see in this case is if I select just our traditional stud, is a 600S 137-33s. Same thing when it comes to our cripples and also our end studs. In the software, you can change your end studs, your opening conditions to what you need it to be. However, let's say, for example, you just need to change your cripples to maybe a different gauge or maybe even a different type of member. That is something that is available in the miscellaneous, in the structural members, in the miscellaneous tab. And then here, because in the software, anytime you see a blank option, that means it reads the general info tab in the panels property. So what we're going to do is instead of it reading that, we're going to come in here and we're going to change it. So I'm going to change it to, let's say, the 600S 125-33. Going to hit OK, close, and then OK. Now, if I select the cripple, you can see that is now using 600S 125-33s, while my studs are using 137s. So that's a way that you can change that. Also, going back to the doubling and back-to-back options that we also have that same option when it comes to the cripples. That is going to be, again, located under the miscellaneous, and you can see that we have the override. So you can see we have the same options here. So if you are doubling your studs or face-to-face or back-to-back and you don't want your cripples to be affected, what you're going to need to do is you'll need to come in here and hit this to normal. It's just going to put one single stud for your cripples, and then your info studs are going to be doubled or back-to-back. Again, please note that these options only do it to the studs, not to your openings. So openings is a different method on that one. Perfect. So I'm just going to hit OK on that one. And another option that we have, so let me just go into a 3D view. It is the double studs. There it is. There it is. It's a double studs at slope change. So this is the last option that we have in the in the structural member tab. A good example to use this for is if, let's say, for example, you have a beam pocket here. Now, if I do select the Revit wall itself and I go to edit profile, you see that I have edited the wall's profile to have that beam pocket. This also works if you have, let's say, for example, a slope, so maybe a gable wall. That also works. Also, because the top track location or slope does change. You can see out of the box, MWF does recognize it and it does, create that location. However, because of the stud spacing, no studs are landing here. So this is where the double stud slope change option can come in. So it will see that you have did a change there. It's right now my panel's height is at 15.8, and then it just cut down to, I'm going to say, let's say 10.8, and this is where we would want to have this option checked so that it adds those additional members if, when needed. So I'm going to hit close. And again, because we're adding additional members, you have that subassembly option. I'm going to hit OK. And you can see if I zoom in over here, you can see that it has placed a full member, and then it realizes that you have the elevation is different here, and it's created that member there. So again, like I said, one option that you can use it for is the beam pocket. If you have, let's say, a gable wall and the spacing does not hit where that peak is, that is an option you can have, you can use. Also, this is an option that you can have already checked in into your template. If the panel that you're currently using does not have a slope, it's not going to affect it. However, as soon as you do put something in like this, it will automatically do it for you. So that is a neat option to have. So for this week's webinar, I went over the structural member options in the panels property.
Awesome. Thank you, Marilyn. So we have time right now if there are any questions. So I'd like to remind everyone that if you'd like to pose a question live, you can do so by clicking on the hand icon in the control panel. Just please also make sure that your audio is working correctly. And just while we wait for any questions to come through, again, another reminder, the recording of the presentation will be sent through tomorrow. As always, please feel free to share the recording with any colleagues. And if you're looking for it a little earlier, you can typically find it at the end of the day today across our social media channels. All right, I'll just give it a second. All right, it looks like we have a question from Christopher. Christopher, I'm just going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead.
Everybody hear me all right? Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I just had a question when dealing in the miscellaneous tab. The cripple override, when I go to override, when I'm using the multi-system header, the cripple override doesn't work for some reason. I'm always stuck with just using whatever I have in my standard stud. The type cripple override won't actually listen to what it has in that box. The configuration type will, and I can change it to back-to-back or whatever configuration I need. But when I actually try to change the member size while using the multi-system header, it seems to not be working.
Okay, so if that's the situation, what's gonna needs to be happening is that we'll need to get the multi-system marker to read that information. So that's probably what's happening right now, is that the marker is going to override whatever value you put in there. So that's something that we just have to add to the software for it to read that information.
Okay, so at this time, we just have to go with manually kind of changing our cripples.
Yes, another option that maybe you can try to use, it would be is to use the edit wands that we have or the modify generate to see if that does it also. However, there could be a possibility the marker will override it because what's happening is the marker takes more priority than other things. So we'll just need to add that option to state that when we are overriding the crippled option to read if there's a value in there, to use that instead of the default.
Okay, awesome. And then I just had another question, sticking in the miscellaneous tab here. The add double studs at top slope change.
Yes.
Would there be a way to do that at the bottom of the wall?
So currently we don't have an option for that, but that is something that we can add to a list to eventually add to the software.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to give it another couple of seconds, see if there's any questions that come through. All right, well, that looks like it is a wrap for today. If there are any questions after we close the session, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our contact details will be provided along with the recording tomorrow. as well as if you'd like to set up a one-on-one demonstration with a member of the team, we'll be happy to get that set up for you. All right, we'll now be ending the webinar. I just want to say a big thank you to Marilyn, and also thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you guys. Have a nice day.